The physically or emotionally absent father and over-involved smother mother dynamic is a very common parental dynamic. Now, what these terms are from an archetypal perspective, I'm going to focus on the feminine figure in this. These are called devouring mothers. Smother mothers, devouring mothers. Okay. This is a woman who is overly involved with her children and in a certain capacity also lacks her own autonomous identity. And so what she does is she devours her children's autonomy. She consumes their independence and sustains herself and her identity through that. Now, that's a radical simplification. There's a lot more on this. This figure, this entity, is an archetype. It can also be found in men, but you're predominantly going to see it in women, more at least. You'd also see it culturally, politically, governmentally. This is a very expansive thing. There's a lot more to say on this, but what I want to keep this on is a lot of people are raised in a dynamic like this where dad is not present, either not physically present or certainly not emotionally present. And as a consequence, mom is as involved as she would be as a mother, but she feels like she has to pick up the slack for dad too. And she gets overly involved and hypercompensates the opposite direction. So what ends up happening is you got a dad who's not involved enough, and you got a mom who's way too involved. And so these children that are raised in this kind of environment don't end up being bestowed with that kind of the discipline, the self-confidence, the self-certainty, the direction, the boldness that they would need to get from the masculinity of the father. And whatever feminine qualities they might have gotten from mother, like gentleness and sensitivity and empathy and intuition and creativity, that's kind of overwhelmed by just how involved she is because she's devoured a lot of these positive masculine qualities. And so they don't fully tap into these feminine qualities that they did get from mom, but they also didn't tap into dad's qualities. And if you want an example of what this looks like from a myth or a fairy tale standpoint, do you guys remember the story of Hansel and Gretel? Old Brothers Grimm fairy tale from Germany. It's got to be the 1800s, maybe older, where it's there's a lot more to the story, obviously, but kind of two kids, brother and sister, they're going through the woods. They end up running into a Baba Yaga type witch, devouring mother figure. She lures them into her gingerbread house, and then what she ends up doing is she locks up the boy and then has the girl do all of the chores around the house while she's trying to like fatten up the boy, and then her plan ultimately is to eat both of the children. Okay? What our ancestors or the people who wrote these fairy tales were trying to tell us is like this is a common archetypal trope that you will see in upbringing. That's why they chose children specifically for this. This was a feminine figure who specifically is trying to she puts the boy into a cage. She captures him, and so he has no autonomy and independence, and that boyish like rugged individualism that he needs to develop into a masculine man is being stifled because he's caged, and she's fattening, aka softening him up to be consumed. And likewise for the daughter is not in a cage. Most interestingly, the daughter's not in a cage, but the daughter is the one going around the house and doing the chores and stoking the fire and bringing the supplies, and she's contributing to this process. And I think what you see this with in a modern day parallel, what this would look like for a child being raised by a mother like this, is you would see a mother who has a son like that. Typically, the mother has this enmeshed, somewhat incestuous type of relationship. And the mother with a son like that, she devours his independent development. She devours the development of his masculinity, and he stays soft and weak and childish and boyish. And he just kind of like lives this kind of life. And you'd see that with a man who is, let's say, highly addicted to video games or some alcohol or some other kind of escapism, and he's the classic basement dweller living in his mother's basement. And you make fun of this guy, right? Oh, you're 45 years old and you're living in your mother's basement, kind of thing. Like, we make fun of that kind of individual, but that individual is a product of this kind of archetypal mythological structure. Is he a man like that likely has a woman who has in no small part contributed to that. I'm not excusing him, like part of this is like find your balls, bro. It's important, and step into being a man. But a lot of why he has been so emasculated and is as impotent as he is because his masculinity has been castrated and devoured by the archetype that his mother is possessed by. It's kind of wild. It's freaking like it's pretty wild. But yeah, you see that with the boy. Okay, he's locked in a cage. His masculinity is contained and he's softened up. But the girl, she does all the chores. And so I think what this represents when you see this kind of dynamic is a devouring mother with her daughter. What you tend to see is that daughters become these. They become like the little workhorses. The daughters are the ones who have to do all the chores. They do all the heavy lifting. Mother is almost kind of this like, oh, she could be like depressed or bedridden, or she's just not showing up as a mother. And so the little girl gets parentified at a very young age and almost has to pick up the slack. And you especially see this the case if this little girl has a brother. And it's almost like the mother will dote on the brother and keep him soft and infantile, but then she doesn't give any of that same attention to the daughter, and the daughter is parentified and is almost like the mother to her own mother. And she's doing all of this work around the house, and she's like juggling all of these hats. And it's almost like the devouring mother she's devouring the son's masculinity, but she's also devouring the daughter's femininity to sustain herself. And it's a devouring dynamic in both directions. And I think that's why you see in this fairy tale how the little girl is allowed to just run around the house, but she's kind of expected to like help the witch in this imprisoning of both of them. And I just find that so fascinating that that's how it played out. I never realized the symbolism when you first hear this when you're like a little kid, just think it's a witch trying to eat kids, like what does this mean? But the more I've worked with clients and you've seen this tendency over and over and over, and this is a very common tendency. This is a very common pattern is emotionally absent father. Notice how there is no father in that story. Actually, there is a father, but for a separate time. He abandoned his kids, and that's why they went out to the woods. Emotionally absent father, physically not there at all, led right into the clutches of a devouring mother who stifles the boy's autonomous, independent masculine development and then also vampirizes the girl and forces her into kind of parentifying herself. They nailed it in the fairy tale of 100, 150 years ago, and same kind of patterns today.